Ethan Collins sat in the dimly lit hospital room, staring out the window at the gray sky. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, and the faint hum of machines echoed in the background. He was a man who had everything: money, power, influence. But none of it mattered now. At 48 years old, Ethan had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, one that no amount of wealth could cure. His doctors had given him months, maybe a year if he was lucky. But Ethan wasn't thinking about his health or the grim prognosis. Instead, his mind was consumed by something else entirely. His family, his siblings, Rachel and Daniel, were like vultures circling above him, waiting for him to take his last breath so they could swoop in and claim his fortune. They had never cared about him when he was healthy. Why would they start now? Ethan knew their true intentions all too well. For years they had tried to manipulate him, pressuring him into signing over parts of his estate or cutting deals that would benefit them financially, and now with his time running out they were growing bolder, more desperate. It made him sick just thinking about it. As Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his bed, the door creaked open, pulling him from his thoughts. A young woman walked in, her soft footsteps barely making a sound on the tiled floor. She was dressed in light blue scrubs, her dark hair tied back in a neat ponytail. Her name tag read, Clara Bennett, and she carried a clipboard in one hand while adjusting her stethoscope with the other. "Good morning, Mr. Collins," Clara said warmly, offering him a small smile. "How are you feeling today?" Ethan gave her a dismissive glance. He didn't have the energy or the desire to engage in polite conversation. "I've been better," he muttered dryly, turning his gaze back to the window. Clara nodded, unfazed by his curt response. She had dealt with difficult patients before, and she understood that people often lashed out when they were scared or in pain. Setting the clipboard down on the bedside table, she approached him gently. "Your vitals look stable, but I noticed you haven't eaten much since yesterday. Is there anything specific you'd like me to bring you? Something to make you more comfortable?" Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples with his fingers. "No, thank you," he replied tersely. "I'm not really hungry." Clara hesitated for a moment, studying him carefully. There was something about this man, something beyond the gruff exterior and the obvious discomfort of being confined to a hospital bed. She could see the weariness in his eyes, the weight of whatever burden he carried. It tugged at her heartstrings, reminding her why she had chosen nursing as a career in the first place. She wanted to help people, not just physically, but emotionally, too. "Well, if you change your mind, just let me know," she said softly, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "I'm here to help." For the first time since she entered the room, Ethan turned to look at her. There was a flicker of curiosity in his expression, as though he hadn't expected kindness from someone like her. Most people treated him differently once they learned who he was, either fawning over him because of his wealth or resenting him for it. But Clara seemed different, genuine. Over the next few days, Clara continued to care for Ethan, checking in on him regularly and ensuring he was as comfortable as possible. Slowly but surely he began to open up to her, sharing fragments of his life between bouts of silence. He told her about his work, his travels, and eventually, his strained relationship with his family. Clara listened patiently, nodding along and offering words of encouragement whenever he needed them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan decided to confide in her fully. "Clara," he began hesitantly, his voice low and serious. "There's something I need to ask you." She looked up from the chart she was reviewing, surprised by the urgency in his tone. "Of course, Mr. Collins, what is it?" He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "My siblings. They're relentless. They've been hounding me for years, trying to get their hands on my money. Now that I'm unwell, they've become even worse. They call constantly, visit without invitation, and make snide remarks about how I should settle things before it's too late." He paused, shaking his head in frustration. "It's exhausting." Clara frowned sympathetically. That must be incredibly difficult for you. It is, he admitted. And it's why I need your help. I want them to believe I'm married, to think I have someone in my life who will inherit everything after I'm gone. If they think I'm happily settled, maybe they'll back off and leave me alone. Clara blinked, taken aback by his request. You want me to pretend to be your wife? She asked incredulously. Ethan nodded, his expression earnest. Just temporarily, until my condition stabilizes, or until... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I'll compensate, you generously, of course. You wouldn't have to worry about working here anymore. Think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. Clara hesitated, her mind racing. On one hand, the idea was absurd. Pretending to be someone's spouse? It sounded like the plot of a movie, not real life. But on the other hand, she couldn't deny the desperation in Ethan's eyes. He was a lonely man trapped not only by his illness but also by the greed of those around him. And then there was the practical side of things. Her family was struggling financially, and the money Ethan offered could make a world of difference for them. I don't know, she said finally, biting her lip. This seems complicated. I understand if you say no, Ethan replied, quickly, but please consider it. I wouldn't ask if I didn't truly need your help. Clara exhaled slowly, weighing her options. After a long moment, she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. But we need to set some ground rules. Ethan's face lit up with relief, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that transformed his entire demeanor. Thank you, Clara. You won't regret this. Little did either of them know, their agreement would lead to far more than either of them had anticipated. The next morning, Clara arrived at Ethan's sprawling estate, a mansion perched on a hill surrounded by lush greenery and tall iron gates. She had only seen it in pictures before, but standing there in person made her realize just how grand it truly was. The driveway stretched out like a ribbon of polished stone, leading to the massive front doors framed by towering columns. It was beautiful, yes, but also intimidating. As she stepped out of the car, clutching her small suitcase, Clara couldn't help but feel a pang of nervousness. What had she gotten herself into? Ethan greeted her at the door, looking surprisingly relaxed despite his frail appearance. He wore a simple sweater and slacks, a far cry from the tailored suits he usually favored. Welcome, he said with a faint smile, gesturing for her to come inside. Clara followed him into the house, her eyes widening as she took in the opulent interior. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, marble floors gleamed underfoot, and expensive artwork adorned the walls. Everything about the place screamed wealth, yet there was an undeniable emptiness to it. The silence was almost deafening. This is incredible, Clara murmured, trying to mask her awe. Do you live here alone? Ethan nodded, his expression softening. For years now. I've never been much of a people person. Clara didn't press further, sensing that the topic was a sensitive one. Instead, she focused on the task ahead. Over the next few hours, Ethan walked her through the plan. They would need to act convincingly as husband and wife whenever anyone else was around, especially his siblings. He showed her which rooms were off-limits, explained the household staff's schedules, and even gave her tips on how to address certain topics without raising suspicion. You'll have your own room upstairs, Ethan added, pointing toward the staircase. But if Rachel or Daniel visit unexpectedly, we'll have to share a bedroom, just to sell the illusion. Clara swallowed hard, feeling a knot form in her stomach. Sharing a room? That hadn't been part of their initial agreement. Still, she forced a smile and nodded. Got it. Anything else I should know? That's all for now, Ethan replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced himself. We'll figure things out as we go. The first few days passed relatively smoothly. Clara settled into her new role with surprising ease, learning to navigate the ins and outs of pretending to be Ethan's wife. She practiced calling him endearing nicknames like honey and dear when the staff was nearby, careful not to overdo it. She also started paying closer attention to details, how he liked his coffee, what kind of music he enjoyed, and use them to make their charade seem more authentic. Despite her growing confidence, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. For all her efforts, their interactions still felt hollow. Ethan treated her kindly enough, but there was a distance between them, an invisible wall she couldn't quite breach. She wondered if it was because he saw her as nothing more than an employee playing a part, or if he simply didn't trust her yet. Her doubts were put to the test sooner than expected. One afternoon, while Clara was helping Ethan review some paperwork in his study, the doorbell rang. A moment later, the housekeeper appeared, announcing that Rachel and Daniel Collins had arrived unannounced. Ethan stiffened visibly, his jaw tightening as he exchanged a glance with Clara. "Stay calm," he whispered under his breath before rising to greet his siblings. Rachel swept into the room first, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She was impeccably dressed in a designer dress and oversized sunglasses, which she removed with a dramatic flourish. Her sharp features and piercing gaze made her look every bit as formidable as Ethan had described. Behind her trailed Daniel, who carried himself with an air of smug entitlement. His smirk widened as his eyes landed on Clara. Well, Rachel drawled, crossing her arms. "So this is the mysterious woman who's supposedly stolen our brother's heart?" Clara felt her cheeks flush, but she forced herself to remain composed. Stepping forward, she extended her hand politely. "Hello, I'm Clara. It's nice to finally meet you both." Rachel ignored the gesture, opting instead to scrutinize Clara from head to toe. "You're younger than I imagined," she remarked coolly. "And so, ordinary." Daniel chuckled, clearly amused by his sister's bluntness. "Don't mind Rachel," he said with mock sincerity. "She's just surprised Ethan managed to find someone willing to put up with him." Ethan cleared his throat, stepping between Clara and his siblings. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Clara and I are very happy together, and I'd appreciate it if you showed her some respect." Rachel raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Happy, huh? Funny. We hadn't heard a peep about you until recently. Care to explain why you kept her a secret all this time?" "It wasn't intentional," Ethan replied smoothly. "We wanted to keep things private until we were sure about our relationship. But now that we are, there's no reason to hide anymore." Clara nodded along, doing her best to appear confident. Inside, however, her heart was racing. These two were even worse than Ethan had warned her about. Sharp-tongued and relentless, she could see the skepticism in their eyes, the way they seemed determined to pick apart every word she said. To her relief, Ethan took charge of the conversation, steering it away from dangerous territory. He introduced Clara to the staff, emphasizing how seamlessly she had integrated into their lives. He even joked about their whirlwind romance, spinning tales of chance encounters and instant connections that sounded convincing enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. By the time Rachel and Daniel left, Clara was exhausted. She collapsed onto the couch in the living room, letting out a shaky breath. "That was intense," she admitted, running a hand through her hair. "They're not going to let this go anytime soon, are they?" Ethan shook his head, sinking into the chair opposite her. "No, they won't. But you handled yourself beautifully. I couldn't have asked for a better partner in this." Clara smiled weakly, appreciating the compliment. Yet deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Pretending to be Ethan's wife wasn't just about fooling his siblings, it was about maintaining the illusion day after day, week after week. And the longer she stayed, the harder it became to separate reality from fiction. As the weeks went by, Clara found herself growing increasingly attached to Ethan. Despite his reserved nature, he had a quiet charm that drew her in. He often surprised her with thoughtful gestures like leaving handwritten notes on her pillow or arranging for her favorite meals to be prepared by the chef. He listened intently whenever she spoke, asking questions that showed he genuinely cared about her thoughts and feelings. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony watching the sunset, Ethan turned to her with a contemplative look. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," he said softly. "Most people treat me differently once they learn who I am. But you don't. Clara tilted her head, studying him curiously. Why should I? Money doesn't define who you are, he laughed bitterly, shaking his head. You'd be surprised how many people disagree with you. My family certainly does. They don't know what they're missing, Clara replied earnestly. Anyone who can't see past your wealth isn't worth your time. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he reached out and placed a hand over hers. Thank you, Clara. For everything. Her heart skipped a beat at the contact and she quickly looked away, afraid he might notice the blush creeping into her cheeks. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not when their entire relationship was built on lies. But try as she might, Clara couldn't deny the growing warmth she felt whenever Ethan was near. Little did she know her feelings were becoming just as complicated as the situation itself. The days turned into weeks, and Clara found herself settling into a rhythm at Ethan's estate. Pretending to be his wife had become almost second nature to her now. She knew which rooms to avoid when guests were over, how to hold her teacup just right during formal gatherings, and even how to laugh at Ethan's dry jokes in a way that sounded natural. But despite her growing confidence, there was always an undercurrent of tension, especially whenever Rachel or Daniel visited. 1. Morning. As Clara was helping Ethan sort through some documents in his study, the housekeeper entered with another unexpected announcement. Mr. Collins, she said hesitantly, your lawyer is here to see you. Ethan frowned, setting down the papers he'd been holding. Did he say what it's about? No, sir. He said it was urgent. Clara exchanged a glance with Ethan, sensing his unease. Urgent visits from lawyers rarely brought good news. Still, she followed him downstairs to the sitting room, where a middle-aged man in a dark suit stood waiting. His briefcase was clutched tightly in one hand, and his expression gave nothing away. Good morning, Mr. Collins, the lawyer greeted, shaking Ethan's hand before turning to nod politely at Clara. And Mrs. Collins, I presume? Yes, Clara replied quickly, hoping her nerves didn't show. The title still felt strange on her tongue, but she'd learned to embrace it for the sake of appearances. The lawyer gestured for them both to sit before opening his briefcase. I'm afraid this concerns your parents' will, he began, pulling out a stack of papers. There's a clause we overlooked during the initial review, a stipulation regarding inheritance should you pass while married. Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowing. What kind of stipulation? The lawyer adjusted his glasses, flipping through the pages until he found the relevant section. It states that if you are legally married at the time of your death, your entire estate will transfer directly to your spouse, bypassing any other beneficiaries, including your siblings. A heavy silence fell over the room. Clara's stomach churned as the weight of the revelation sank in. If their charade became public knowledge, or worse, legal, it would mean she'd inherit everything. The thought sent a wave of panic coursing through her veins. She hadn't signed up for this. All she wanted was to help Ethan, not become embroiled in a family feud over billions of dollars. Ethan, however, seemed unfazed. He leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Interesting, he murmured. I suppose my parents were trying to ensure their wealth stayed within the family. The lawyer nodded. Indeed. However, given the circumstances, I thought it best to inform you immediately. Your siblings may not take kindly to this development. Clara swallowed hard, glancing nervously at Ethan. What happens now? She asked quietly. For now, nothing changes, Ethan replied firmly, his voice steady. We continue as planned. No one needs to know about this unless absolutely necessary. Clara nodded, though her mind raced with questions. What if Rachel and Daniel found out? Would they accuse her of manipulating Ethan? Worse yet, what if the truth came out, that their marriage wasn't real? The mere thought made her head spin. Fate would have it, their fears weren't unfounded. Just 2 days later, Rachel and Daniel returned unannounced, storming into the mansion like a hurricane. Their faces were flushed with anger, and their voices echoed loudly through the halls. You've got some nerve, Rachel snapped, barging into the living room where Ethan and Clara were seated. Her eyes blazed with fury as she pointed an accusatory finger at Clara. "Who do you think you are, waltzing in here and stealing our brother's fortune?" Clara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, glancing at Ethan for support. "Oh, spare us the innocent act," Daniel sneered, stepping closer. "We know about the clause in Mom and Dad's will. You're nothing but a gold digger, aren't you? Using Ethan's illness to swindle him out of everything." "That's enough," Ethan barked, rising to his feet. His voice was sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Clara has done nothing wrong. She's here because I asked her to be. This isn't about money. It's about protecting me from vultures like you two." Rachel scoffed, crossing her arms defiantly. "Protecting you? From us? Don't make me laugh. We're your family, Ethan. Unlike her, who showed up out of nowhere just when you conveniently fell ill." Clara felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She hated being accused of something she hadn't done, especially when her intentions had been pure from the start. But before she could defend herself, Ethan stepped in front of her protectively. "She's not lying," he said, his tone icy. "I hired her to play the role of my wife because I knew you'd stop at nothing to get your hands on my money. But guess what? My feelings for Clara are real now. And if you can't accept that, then maybe it's time for you both to leave." The room fell silent. Rachel and Daniel stared at him, stunned by his declaration. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then Rachel let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're making a huge mistake," she spat venomously. "Mark my words, Ethan, you'll regret trusting her." With that, she stormed out, dragging Daniel behind her. Once they were gone, the tension in the room lifted slightly, though Clara still felt shaken. She looked up at Ethan, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Why did you say that?" she whispered. "About your feelings. It's not true." Ethan hesitated, his expression softening. "Isn't it?" he asked quietly. "Because I meant every word." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to believe him, to think that maybe, just maybe, their connection had grown into something more than just a facade. But the guilt gnawed at her relentlessly. She had started this pretending to help him, not to complicate his life further. "I'm sorry," she murmured, lowering her gaze. "I never wanted things to get so messy." Ethan reached out, gently tilting her chin upward so their eyes met. "None of this is your fault," he said firmly. "You've done nothing but stand by me, Clara. That means more to me than you'll ever know." His words warmed her heart, but the doubts lingered. How could she reconcile her growing feelings for Ethan with the lie they were living, and what would happen when the truth finally came out? Over the next few days, Clara wrestled with her conscience. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was betraying Ethan somehow, even though he insisted otherwise. Every smile, every touch, every shared moment between them felt tainted by the secret hanging over their heads. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony watching the stars, Clara finally worked up the courage to speak her mind. "Ethan," she began hesitantly, twisting her hands nervously in her lap. "I need to tell you something." He turned to face her, concern flickering across his features. "What is it?" I don't deserve your kindness," she admitted, her voice trembling. "This whole thing started as a job, a way for me to help you. But somewhere along the way I started caring about you too much. And now I feel like I'm taking advantage of you." Ethan studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he smiled softly. "Clara," he said, placing a reassuring hand over hers, "you're not taking advantage of me. If anything, I'm the one who owes you. You've given me something I haven't had in years: companionship, trust, love. Don't ever apologize for that." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, spilling down her cheeks despite her efforts to hold them back. "But what happens when this is all over?" she asked brokenly. "When you're gone, how am I supposed to move on knowing I let myself fall for someone I shouldn't have?" Ethan cupped her face gently, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," he whispered. "For now, let's focus on today. Let's make the most of whatever time we have left. Together." Clara nodded, leaning into his touch. In that moment, she realized that love didn't always follow logic or reason. Sometimes it simply happened, and all you could do was embrace it, flaws and all. The days following Rachel and Daniel's explosive visit were tense. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that their accusations had planted seeds of doubt in Ethan's mind, even though he had defended her fiercely. She replayed their confrontation over and over in her head, wondering if she should confess everything. The truth about why she agreed to pretend to be his wife, her initial hesitation, and the guilt she carried for letting things go so far. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed more determined than ever to prove his siblings wrong. He began planning a lavish dinner party, inviting not only close family friends but also business associates who had known him for years. His goal was clear: to introduce Clara as his wife and solidify their relationship in the eyes of everyone around them. It was a bold move, one that Clara found both thrilling and terrifying. "Are you sure about this?" Clara asked nervously, as they prepared for the event. They were standing in Ethan's study, surrounded by stacks of invitations and catering menus. "Your siblings will be there, and they're not going to let this go easily." Ethan nodded, his expression resolute. "I'm sure," he said firmly. "If we want to put an end to their scheming once and for all, we need to show them and everyone else that what we have is real." Clara hesitated, biting her lip. "But what if it backfires? What if someone sees through us?" "They won't," Ethan replied confidently. "As long as we stick to our story and act naturally, no one will suspect a thing. Trust me, Clara. We can do this." Though his words reassured her, Clara couldn't ignore the gnawing anxiety in her chest. This wasn't just another casual gathering. It was a high-stakes performance where one misstep could unravel everything. Still, she forced herself to focus, knowing that backing out now would only make things worse. The night of the dinner party arrived sooner than Clara expected. As she stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, adjusting the strap of her elegant emerald green dress, she tried to steady her nerves. The gown fit perfectly, hugging her curves in all the right places, but it did little to ease the knot of tension in her stomach. She practiced smiling at her reflection, reminding herself to stay calm and composed. When she descended the staircase, Ethan was waiting for her at the bottom. He looked handsome in a tailored black suit, his usually gruff demeanor softened by the warmth in his eyes as he gazed up at her. "You look stunning," he said sincerely, offering her his arm. Clara smiled faintly, looping her arm through his. "Thank you. You don't look so bad yourself." Together they greeted their guests, exchanging pleasantries and posing for photographs as if they had been married for years. Clara played her part flawlessly, laughing at Ethan's jokes and leaning into him affectionately whenever someone complimented their love story. To anyone watching, they appeared to be the perfect couple, a fairy tale romance brought to life. But beneath the surface, Clara's heart raced with every passing moment. She kept glancing toward the entrance, dreading the arrival of Rachel and, Daniel. When they finally walked in, dressed impeccably and wearing identical smirks, Clara felt her confidence waver. "Well, well," Rachel drawled, approaching them with deliberate slowness. "Don't you two look cozy?" Clara forced herself to smile politely. "Rachel, Daniel, I'm glad you could make it," Daniel snorted, clearly unimpressed. "Wouldn't miss it for the world. After all, we wouldn't want to miss seeing the woman who's managed to charm our dear brother." Before Clara could respond, Rachel cut in, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Tell me, Clara, how exactly did you two meet? Ethan's never been one for romance, so forgive me if I find your sudden marriage convenient." Clara opened her mouth to answer, but Ethan beat her to it. "We met through mutual friends," he said smoothly, wrapping an arm protectively around Clara's waist. "And yes, it happened quickly, but sometimes love doesn't wait for logic or timing." Rachel rolled her eyes, unconvinced. "How sweet. But tell me, Clara, what exactly do you do for a living? Or are you content living off my brother's wealth?" The room grew quiet, all eyes turning toward Clara. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she refused to let Rachel intimidate her. "I'm a nurse," she replied evenly, meeting Rachel's gaze head-on. "And I didn't marry Ethan for his money. I care about him, and that's all that matters." For a brief moment, Rachel looked taken aback. Then, recovering her composure, she smirked. "Touching. But forgive me if I find it hard to believe that someone like you could truly understand someone like Ethan." "That's enough," Ethan snapped, his voice cutting through the tension. "Clara is my wife, and I won't tolerate anyone insulting her or questioning our relationship. If you can't respect that, then you're welcome to leave." Rachel's jaw tightened and Daniel shot her a warning glance. Clearly, they hadn't anticipated Ethan defending Clara so fiercely. Without another word, Rachel turned on her heel and stormed off, dragging Daniel with her. As the crowd dispersed, returning to their conversations and hors d'oeuvres, Clara exhaled shakily. "That was intense," she murmured, leaning against Ethan for support. "You handled it beautifully," he whispered, pressing a reassuring kiss to her temple. "Thank you for standing by me." Clara nodded, though her mind was still reeling. The confrontation had been draining, but it wasn't over yet. She knew Rachel and Daniel wouldn't give up so easily, not when millions of dollars were at stake. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, Clara found herself alone on the balcony, staring out at the moonlit garden below, the near. Cool night air helped calm her frayed nerves, but it couldn't silence the storm raging inside her. She thought about Rachel's accusations, about the secrets she and Ethan had built their entire charade upon. How long could they keep this up before the truth came crashing down? "Mind if I join you?" Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. She turned to see him standing in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Not at all," she replied softly, making room for him beside her. He handed her one of the glasses and raised his own in a toast. "To surviving tonight," he said with a small smile, "and to proving my siblings wrong." Clara clinked. Her glass against his butt couldn't bring herself to smile. "Ethan," she began hesitantly, setting the glass down on the railing. "There's something I need to tell you." He frowned, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, bracing herself for what she was about to say. "This whole thing, the pretending, the charade, it started because I needed the money. My family. We've been struggling for years, and when you offered me the chance to help them, I couldn't say no. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never meant to fall for you." Ethan stared at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Clara feared she had ruined everything, that he would send her away without another word. But then slowly, he reached out and took her hand in his. "I know," he said quietly. "And I don't blame you. You've been honest with me from the start, Clara, even when it wasn't easy. That's why I trust you and why I care about you. More than you realize." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, spilling down her cheeks despite her efforts to hold them back. "I'm sorry," she whispered brokenly. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "You haven't," Ethan assured her, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "We've both made mistakes, Clara, but none of that matters now. All that matters is us, and whatever time we have left together." As she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, Clara realized that Ethan was right. Love wasn't about perfection or flawless beginnings. It was about choosing to stand by someone, even when the road ahead was uncertain. And for the first time since agreeing to pretend to be his wife, she felt truly at peace. The weeks that followed the dinner party were some of the happiest Clara had ever known. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully embrace the moments she shared with Ethan. The charade they had started no longer felt like a lie. It felt like something real. They spent their days exploring the estate together, sitting by the fireplace in the evenings, and talking about everything from childhood memories to dreams they still hoped to fulfill. Ethan's health remained fragile, but his spirits improved dramatically, thanks in large part to Clara's unwavering presence. But as much as Clara tried to focus on the joy of the present, The shadow of Ethan's illness loomed over them. His. Doctors had warned him that his condition was worsening, and though he rarely spoke of it, Clara could see the toll it was taking on him. He grew weaker with each passing day, relying more heavily on her for support, not just physically, but emotionally too. One afternoon, as they sat together in the garden, Ethan turned to Clara with a thoughtful expression. "Do you believe in fate?" he asked suddenly, catching her off guard. Clara tilted her head, considering the question. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Why do you ask?" Ethan shrugged, staring out at the flowers blooming around them. "Sometimes I wonder if we were meant to meet. If all of this, the illness, the pretending, even my siblings' greed, happened for a reason. To bring me to you." Clara's heart swelled at his words, but she couldn't ignore the bittersweet undertone. She reached out, placing a hand over his. "I don't know about fate," she said softly, "but I do know that meeting you changed my life, for the better." They sat in silence for a while, simply enjoying each other's company. But deep down, Clara knew their time together was running out. Every laugh, every touch, every shared glance felt heavier now, imbued with the knowledge that it might be one of the last. A few days later, Ethan's health took a sudden turn for the worse. One morning, Clara found him struggling to breathe, his face pale and drawn. She called the doctor immediately, who advised bringing him back to the hospital. Reluctantly, Clara packed a bag and accompanied Ethan, holding his hand tightly as they drove through the rain-soaked streets. At the hospital, the staff worked quickly to stabilize him, but the prognosis was grim. Ethan's body was shutting down, and there was little they could do beyond making him comfortable. Clara stayed by his side day and night, refusing to leave even when the nurses urged her to rest. Late one evening, as the city lights twinkled, beyond the window, Ethan opened his eyes and looked at Clara. His voice was weak, but his gaze was clear and full of love. "Clara," he whispered, reaching for her hand. "Thank you for being here. For everything." Tears streamed down Clara's face as she held his hand close. "Don't talk like that," she choked out. "You're going to get through this." Ethan smiled faintly, shaking his head. "We both know that's not true. But I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Clara replied, her voice trembling. "Promise me you'll keep living," he said softly. "After I'm gone, don't let guilt or sadness hold you back. Take the money and use it to build the life you deserve. Help your family, travel, follow your dreams. Just don't stop." Clara nodded, clutching his hand as if letting go would mean losing him forever. "I promise," she whispered, "but I'll miss you so much." "I'll always be with you," Ethan murmured, his eyelids growing heavy. "In every sunrise, every flower, every moment of happiness you find, remember that." With those final words, Ethan closed his eyes and drifted into a peaceful sleep. Clara stayed by his side until the end, holding his hand and whispering goodbye through her tears. In the days that followed Ethan's passing, Clara struggled to come to terms with her loss. The mansion felt eerily empty without him, its grandeur overshadowed by the absence of the man who had made it feel like home. Rachel and Daniel wasted no time contesting the will, accusing Clara of manipulating Ethan into marrying her. But their claims fell flat when the lawyer presented evidence of their genuine affection. Letters Ethan had written to Clara, photographs of their time together, and testimony from friends who had witnessed their bond. When the legal battle was finally resolved, Clara inherited Ethan's fortune as per the terms of the will. True to her promise, she used the money wisely. She paid off her family's debts, set up scholarships for aspiring nurses, and donated generously to charities supporting terminal illness research. Though the wealth was overwhelming at times, she never lost sight of what truly mattered: honoring Ethan's memory and continuing the legacy of kindness he had inspired in her. Rachel and Daniel eventually reconciled with Clara, realizing too late that she had never sought their brother's money for herself. During a quiet meeting at the mansion, they apologized for their behavior and expressed gratitude for the way Clara had cared for Ethan during his final days. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a start, a chance to heal old wounds and move forward. As months passed, Clara began to rebuild her life. She moved out of the mansion, choosing instead to live in a cozy apartment closer to her family. She returned to nursing, finding solace in helping others navigate their own struggles. And though she missed Ethan every single day, she carried his lessons with her, to cherish the people you love, to embrace life fully, and to never let fear stand in the way of happiness. On a crisp autumn morning, Clara visited Ethan's grave. She knelt before the simple stone marker, placing a bouquet of wildflowers at its base. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "For everything." As she stood and turned to leave, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves above her, carrying with it the faint scent of blooming flowers. For a moment she could almost hear Ethan's voice, soft and reassuring, reminding her that love endures, even after goodbye. And so, Clara walked away, ready to face whatever came next. Her heart still ached, but it was lighter now, filled with gratitude for the time they had shared and the promise of new beginnings. In the end, their story wasn't just about loss. It was about love, resilience, and the enduring power of connection.